On Sunday, April the 24th, 2016, the first round of the Austrian presidential elections occurred. Contrary to the opinion polls, which showed a virtual dead heat between the Green candidate Alexander van der Bellen, the populist right-wing Freedom Party's candidate Mr. Norbert Hofer, and the more popular of the two independent candidates, Ms. Irmgard Ries. Mr. Hofer clearly won the elections according to the preliminary results provided by the English language Wikipedia article on the election. He received 36.4% of the vote. Mr. van der Bellen, who received about 20.4% of the vote according to the preliminary figures, will face Mr. Hofer in the runoff election 4 weeks later. On April the 22nd, 2016, the president-elect will be inaugurated on July the 6th or July the 8th, 2016. Ms. Ries received 18.5% of the vote according to the preliminary results, with the Austrian ruling coalition's candidates, the center-right People's Party's Andreas Kohl and the center-left Social Democratic Party's Rudolf Kunstorfer, both receiving about 11.2%. Socialite and the less popular independent candidate, also businessman, Mr. Richard Lugner, received only about 2.4% of the preliminary votes. According to the Austrian Broadcasting Corporation's ORF's and the Kronenzeitung magazines or newspapers, websites at least, the preliminary voter turnout was about 68%. By contrast, the turnout in the 2010 presidential elections, which were overwhelmingly won by the outgoing President Heinz Fischer, the turnout was under 54%, and that included over 7% invalid votes. This is a major shock for the mainstream Austrian political parties, especially for the so-called Grand Coalition of Social Democrats and People's Party, because in the next parliamentary elections, which will be held by October 2018, the Freedom Party is favored to win, according to the latest opinion polls, over 30% of the vote, which would place it in a strong position to re-enter the government where it was from 2000 to 2006, or 2007 rather, under then Federal Chancellor Wolfgang Schüssel of the People's Party. So far, the Social Democrats have been unwilling to cooperate with the Freedom Party, considering it as too far right and too extreme in its opinions against immigrants, especially immigrants from the Muslim countries, and too Eurosceptic. The People's Party has occasionally shown more willingness to cooperate with the Freedom Party. During the 2000 to 2007 center-right or centrist populist governments of the People's Party and Freedom Party, the People's Party was able to, figuratively speaking, tame the Freedom Party, which actually lost over half of its support during that time period. But since 2008, the party's support has been on the upswing, and because its fellow populist right-wing party, Alliance for the Future of Austria, has mostly faded from the political spectrum, and because there is an increasing dissatisfaction with the long-term ruling parties, Social Democrats and People's Party, and especially accentuated by the refugee crisis, which is ongoing in Austria and various other European countries, and because the Freedom Party claims that it is much less corrupt or not corrupt at all and it's in favor of the ordinary Austrians instead of the elites of the Austrian society, it is likely to result in at least a temporary takeover of political power by the Freedom Party. Of course, the Austrian electoral system, which is proportional, prevents the Freedom Party from getting an absolute majority in the National Council, which is the lower and by far more powerful of the two houses of the Austrian Federal Parliament. But should the Austrian Freedom Party receive the largest number of votes and seats in the 2018 Austrian parliamentary elections, it is likely to get to the next federal government, and one of its members very likely will be appointed as the next federal chancellor or prime minister of the Austrian Republic. The federal president has some important reserve powers which are rarely used, such as the right to choose and even to dismiss the federal chancellor, to dissolve the National Council and call early elections, and probably also to veto laws passed by the Austrian Federal Parliament. In practice, the president rarely uses any of these powers. The president nominates whoever is likely to command a majority in the Austrian National Council as the Austrian Federal Chancellor, and regularly early parliamentary elections are held only on the advice of the Federal Chancellor or of the Austrian Federal Government or of the National Council itself. And probably already for some decades the Austrian federal president has not vetoed any laws passed by the Austrian Federal Parliament, because there is a strong consensual or broad agreement tradition in the Austrian politics, especially at the federal level, whereby most laws to be passed try to accommodate even the wishes of at least one opposition party so that they can be passed by a clear majority.